Raindrops forming patterns I didn't try to understand. Cars passed beside me, their tires cutting through shallow reflections, breaking the sky into pieces on the ground. I kept walking at the same pace. There was a time rain felt like an eruption, something to escape from, something inconvenient. But now it felt more like permission, permission to move slower, permission to arrive without urgency. I passed the storefront window, saw my reflection for a second, distorted by the water on the glass. I didn't correct it, I didn't look longer than necessary, just enough to know I was still here. My hands were cold, but not uncomfortable, alive in a quiet way. By the time I reached the door, my shoulders were down, my hair heavier. I stood there before going inside, not delaying, just acknowledging the distance I had crossed. Nothing extraordinary happened. Still, I wasn't the same person who left earlier. The elevator mirror caught me off guard again. Not because of how I looked, but because I hadn't thought about myself all day. Just moving from one small task to the next without watching it happen. The light above flickered once, then held steady, like it had decided to stay. I leaned back against the wall, felt the quiet vibration under my feet, each floor passing without ceremony. There was a time I would have checked my phone here, suspension, but my hand stayed at my side. Someone had left a faint fingerprint on the metal door, half visible in the right angle of light, proof that someone else had been here before me and left without needing to erase themselves. The elevator stopped, but I didn't step out immediately. Just watch the doors open, watch the space waiting for me. Nothing pulling, nothing pushing. I realize how rare it used to feel to exist without resistance, not fighting the past, not negotiating with the future, just standing inside a moment that didn't ask anything from me. Eventually I stepped forward, not to escape, not to arrive, just to continue.
I didn't need the room to welcome me.
was washing a cup I had already washed before. Not because it was dirty, but because my hands needed something to do. The water ran over the same surface, tracing the same curve, like repetition itself had weight. Outside, the sky was turning that soft gray, not dark, not light, just undecided. Just undecided. I placed the cup on the counter carefully, as if the sound it made mattered. There was a time I would've rushed past this, called it nothing, called it empty. But it wasn't empty, it was uninterrupted. I leaned against the counter, felt the cool edge press into my back. My body was here, not ahead of me, not behind, just here. I thought about how many versions of myself had stood in kitchens like this. Different fears, different expectations, all believing something was missing, but nothing was missing now. The room didn't need to change, I didn't need to change it. The moment was already complete. I turned off the light before leaving, not to end anything, just because it was time. Just because it was just because just because it was time. I was washing a cup I had already washed before. I was washing a cup, I was washing a cup. washing the cup. I was washing the cup. I was washing. I was washing
I left the window open before going to sleep. Not wide, just enough for the air to move. Sometime during the night, the curtain shifted, barely audible. A soft fabric sound that didn't wake me completely.
I stood up slowly, the floor steady beneath me, unchanging. Finding its place, ordinary, precise. I realized I didn't need to prepare myself for the day. I was already inside it. No transition, no ceremony, just continuation.
Closed it gently,
not to keep the world out,
just to mark that I was awake.
just space. Not at a destination, but at the absence of needing one. I stayed a little longer, not because I had nowhere else to go, but because I didn't need to leave yet. Just hands changing position without permission. I have been sitting there longer than I thought. Light shifting across the wall, quietly replacing what was there before. Coffee had gone cold beside me. I didn't remember when I touched the side of the cup, still holding the shape of warmth that wasn't there anymore. There was something honest about that, how things don't announce when they stop being what they were. I used to resist that feeling, tried to hold moments past their natural end, but now I let them pass. Outside, someone closed the car door. The solid familiar sound, then distance again. I realized how much of life exists in between those small signals, not in the events themselves, but in the space that follows them. I stood up slowly, not because I had to, but because stillness had already given me what it needed to. Nothing was missing from the room, and nothing was asking me to stay. Small circles forming and fading into nothing. There was no urgency in it, no need to hold its shade. The light turned green softly without celebration. The street at the same pace, not faster, not slower, just present enough to feel the ground beneath each step. I didn't look back, not because it didn't matter, but because it already had. something dramatic waiting beyond the door. Just stare, just space, just another sequence of ordinary seconds. I stepped outside, and this time I came with myself. I kept walking, not because I was sure, but because I trusted the moment enough not to turn around. Forward. Just no longer resisting its own existence. I remember I stepped away without looking back. Not because I didn't care, but because I didn't need confirmation anymore.
just enough to mark that some
The air shifted for a second, then returned to its usual stillness. I stayed where I was, one hand resting on the table, fingers relaxed, not holding anything. There was a time I would have filled this silence immediately, turned on music, creating movement when none existed. But now I let it remain untouched.
Outside, the sky was losing its color slowly. Not dark yet, not light anymore. That quiet transition most people never stop to see. I realized how much of my life had been spent anticipating arrival, waiting for something to begin, something to confirm I was moving forward.
But nothing was speaking now, and nothing needed to. My breathing stayed steady, uninterrupted. Enough on its own, I didn't need to improve the moment. I didn't need to interpret it. I just needed to stay inside it long enough to understand. It had already accepted me. I stopped in the middle of the sidewalk for no reason I could explain. Not tired, not distracted, just aware of my own weight. Both feet on the ground, danced without effort. The car passed behind me, his presence felt more than heard. A brief shift in the air, then gone. No one noticed that I had paused. No one needed to. There was a time when stillness like this would have made me uncomfortable. the sidewalk for no reason I could explain. Oh, but continuously I began walking again, not to reach anything, just because movement belonged to me. I stopped in the middle of the sidewalk. I stopped